Hello, I'm going to give you a very quick walk through the new Spitfire Audio BBC Symphony Orchestra VST plugin. I've got the VST loaded in Cubase version 10 on a Mac operating system. The sounds have been loaded off an SSD external running through Thunderbolt 2, but that doesn't really matter for this purpose. This is the new plugin. I've loaded a flute, solo flute, first flute I guess they call it, into the interface. I'm going to play a few notes, but you're not going to hear too much because I'm going to play a little bit more with all the settings and show you around the interface for those who haven't yet seen under the bonnet of this plugin. So, flute. So that was just me noodling while fiddling a few little knobs. You could probably hear there that I was playing with the vibrato intensity, although you probably noticed there was nothing moving on the screen, so it was a little bit annoying to know what was going on there. But I'm now going to walk you through the interface and just show you the kind of controls you have available to you on the screen while you're playing, and maybe some of the little tricks under the hood that you can control using a MIDI controller or another type of thing. Well, the first thing to note is that it's a pretty large and cumbersome plugin interface. The interface is big. It sits there in the middle of your screen and it does occupy a lot of real estate. You've got this little corner grabby thing where you can scale it, but then it gets really small and you can't see any of the text. So up to you. Choose how big you want it and then get used to it. The good news is once you've learned to use it, it's fairly easy to navigate around. The other option you have is you can ignore all this gubbins down the bottom and you can click on this little button up top here. Oh yes, and it kind of tries to minimize what you see on the screen, but this could be a Cubase bug. It could just be a VST bug. Now I've got this little black thing down the bottom here that doesn't do anything. And if I click on this back, it appears again and then disappears again. What's interesting is if you turn the plugin off and bring it back in again, it works fine. But then when you make it bigger and smaller again, it comes back to this problem. So this could be a Cubase bug. It could well be a plugin bug. I have no idea. I'll let the other people that know more about this try and fix that. So in the top section, you've essentially got three controls. You've got the slider on the left, which is this one here. And this one is your expression. So essentially, as you slide on your MIDI controller CC11, this goes up and down, and this controls overall volume. If you right click on it, you can remove CC11 and learn a different automation, or you can leave it on there, which is nice. This is rather like the contact instruments we're used to seeing. Next to that is our dynamic control, and you can see that is controlled by the mod lever. So as I move up and down my mod lever or move my mod pedal, I see that moving up and down. And again, that's the dynamic, so similar to all the other Spitfire audio instruments. In fact, most other orchestral instruments these days run on CC1 or mod lever for their dynamic control. So those are the easy ones to understand. Then you've got this strange thing in the middle here with this strange circular icon underneath it. Don't try and explain to me what these mean. Essentially, this means balance. And this means aperture size, in photography, the size of the hole, in other words, the dynamic range. But we'll leave them where they are, and we'll move on to this one. So this has got this strange little section in the middle that glows blue in this case when I hold my mouse over it, and this little knob that moves around the outside with the mouse, or can be assigned to a controller and also move around. So if we can wiggle that controller, there we are. It's moving around. But what does it do? It doesn't actually say. But if you click on the middle, it'll bring up a list of things that it can do. So in this case, we've got reverb selected. There might be an option to choose release trails, tightness, variations, or vibrato. So if I click on reverb, this now controls the reverb. We know that this is assigned to my controller over here because I've just been wiggling it. And if I play with this while playing, lo and behold, it adds some reverberation. This is a reverberation. I've no idea if you can control it any more than that. There's nothing under the hood that you seem to be able to get to, but essentially it's a built-in reverb designed for this hall. I'm assuming it's some kind of impulse taken from the Maida Vale studios. So that's nice. You've got some visual feedback showing you the amount of reverb. But what if I want reverb and vibrato? So I now click on vibrato and I wiggle the same lever and now nothing happens. Well, reverb is changing as I wiggle that knob, but the vibrato on the screen isn't moving because that's assigned to a different MIDI controller. So now I can control vibrato. Here we are with it on and off. It comes on and it goes off. So that's kind of nice, but also kind of frustrating. So if you want to be able to have a visual feedback of where reverb is and vibrato, and maybe even releases, tightness and variation, you're not going to see it here. Weirdly, it's down here. So you click on effects and there they all are. So now if I wiggle my reverb knob, reverb goes up and down. If I wiggle my vibrato knob, the vibrato goes up and down on the top and also on the bottom. So that's kind of weird. I get what they're doing. They're trying to make the interface fairly simple and idiot-proof, but I must be beyond idiot because I'm finding that a little bit frustrating. Because at the time, I may want to be looking, for instance, at which articulation I'm currently on, and I can't do that while watching these. So that's a little bit weird, but I'm sure I'll get used to that. It's just one of those things. The annoying thing is this little chap up here doesn't latch to what you're doing. Wouldn't it be nice if it can automatically follow whatever it is that you've just wiggled and show you what you've just changed rather than the static setting that maybe you're not going to move during the recording or during the playback. But anyway, that's what they've done. So that's the top half. You've got this big circular thing and a couple of vertical things. You've also got all this blank space over here that isn't being used. Nice to be able to use that, and a load of blank space over here that isn't being used now, but is being used. So maybe it'd be a nice thing to put something over here as well and make this interface a whole load smaller and easier to use. Maybe some mix for the microphones will be up the top would be quite useful. But anyway, that's the top half. That's what you've got. If you click on the little drop-down list here, you can choose an instrument. This is actually quite a nice little navigation menu. I've got flutes selected, so it shows me all the flutes, which is nice. If I choose woodwinds, it shows me all the woodwinds, brass, all the brass. I can clear it and show everything, and I can scroll up and down this list, and it's got nice little pictures, tell me what I'm selecting, which is quite a nice little thing. You've got the users at the bottom. I've only made one, a solo legato flute at the moment, but you can see it's nice and easy to scroll up and down, and all you need to do is click on one of these and then press load, and it loads it. If you hold your mouse over the eye, it tells you all about it. It's very nice. And if you click on this little button here, it plays you a kind of note. It all seems to be very low. Violins. Yeah, I know what a violin sounds like, but that's nice. It's kind of interesting, a bit quirky, but quite a nice little interface there. So we're gonna cancel out that by doing that. Okay, so what's down the bottom? What's this bottom bit all about? Well, there's a keyboard, and there's an indication of where your mod lever is, which is kind of nice. Although you can also see that at the top, so that's kind of weird. You can also see where your pitch bend lever is, so you can pitch up and down and watch that. You've also got this button here, which allows you to transpose up and down the virtual keyboard, rather like you would do in Contact, which is quite nice to see where your key switches are down the bottom there. And then you've got this lot up here. This is a multi-function window. You've got this little button here, which looks like a waveform, and that basically allows you to select your articulations, which appear on this lower window here. In this case, there are 2 pages of articulations, so there's a navigation window down the bottom here that allows you to navigate through the different pages, and the little white dots indicate how many pages there are. If you don't like the articulations you've got, you can click on the little pen, and you can then edit a number of articulations you have for this given instrument. So at the moment I've got extended legato plus all the others, long, shorts, etc. I may want to get rid of them, so I can just click on these little crosses and get rid of them, or I can click on the little ticks and get rid of them. So now I'm going to get rid of everything apart from the staccatissimo. So there we are, everything off. Staccatissimo, click on save, and then we're back to there, and now we've just got one window with the stacks. There we are. So that's nice. That's a nice clean interface, and it's nice you can edit it and change what you see. Obviously, when you've got different articulations available to you, it'll use a different amount of memory. So now we've chosen Staccatissimo, we're only using 59 megabytes rather than the full 500 megabytes for the entire patch, which means you can save memory. You can save this as a Staccatissimo articulation, just use this independently, which is kind of nice. Down the bottom right here, you've got a choice of various functions, and these will depend on what instrument you got loaded. But for the case of this Staccatissimo flute, we got the choice of how many round robins we wish to use. Again, that'll save memory if you're not worried about that. You've got a reset on transport option, which will reset all of the CCs and everything you've programmed in and played, which is kind of nice if you want that kind of thing. If you're the kind of person that in the first bar of every recording sets up all your CCs, that's quite a useful thing to have. There's also a reset from key function. So you can click, oh dear, I've just pressed the button. You can see here I've just clicked on C5 inadvertently, but I'm going to turn that off. That'll also reset any of your settings from pressing a key. And then here you might have some options, and these are options about stealing samples of neighboring areas, etc. If you've got that kind of machine gun effect, despite the fact you're using 5 round robins, you can then use different layering to choose different notes. So you've got a +2 and -2 layer, or a doubling up of layer, or a neighboring zone as a choice of where you steal sounds from during that kind of clashy situation. What you've also got here, which is actually really quite nice, rather like you have in Contact, you also have a global transpose option. So you can click on here and just go, right, I'm going to go down an octave. So what this has actually done is you can see it's shifted everything on the keyboard down an octave. So now where I was playing around middle C, I'm now playing an octave above middle C, and middle C has moved on my keyboard down an octave. That's really useful if you're using small keyboards. It's also really useful if you want to split the keyboard and have one instrument at one end and one instrument at the other end, but also quite good if you're playing around with a score, and let's say you've recorded it on a different instrument where the range of your instrument covers different keys, you can bring this down to the same key range. So it's actually quite a handy little feature, and I quite like it. And this comes into its own later when we look at the percussion section, where you can move your percussion around the keyboard and put it wherever you want to have it. So with pitch percussion, with pitched instruments, it moves it to where you want it to be. Whereas with the percussion, of course, if they're untuned, you can put them anywhere you like. It doesn't matter what note they're on, you can put them anywhere. So that's quite a useful function. I quite like that one. If you double click on it, of course, you can enter a note value or whatever yourself, which is quite handy to do. You've also got a tune function up the top, where you can fine-tune your instrument. A little bit frustrating. You have to really be quite careful about where you drag it, and I haven't yet worked out a way of restricting yourself by pressing a combination of Alt or Command or Control. It just seems to be either very sensitive or very loose, and now I'm going to be point something of a, here we are, 0.08 out. I think if you think about that, you may want to put a little number under there to be able to select that. As well as pan and volume up the top here. Let's ignore them for the moment. So that was the articulation selection. Next to that, you've got your mix window. The mix window, you've got 3 or 4 options here. You can scroll across the bottom and choose all the different microphone mixers that come with this instrument. You can also choose whether you just choose the point and click. So if I choose this option, as I move the slider towards close, it'll select the close mics. If I move it towards far, it'll select a combination of the ambient, tree and outrigger mics. It won't use all the complicated mic settings, it just uses the basic 4 mics. This is to save on memory. And it'll dynamically load up the right volume. So if I choose a number here, 60 something, and go back to the non-advanced, you'll see it's chosen a little bit of close, a little bit more tree, and that's going to select the right sound for that mic setting, which is quite nice. You've also got the global option, and this global option allows you to select just this articulation or all articulations. So for instance, you may want the legato solo flute to have a lot more punch to it, and then when it goes to staccato, you may want to then bring it out of the mix and make it slightly further away if you're doing that kind of mixing. So that's quite a useful thing to have too. To be honest, I prefer to have all my mics available on the screen because you can control them using CC controllers. You've got one of these little boxes with lots of knobs on it. You can program this to switch on and off or turn up and down each of these mics individually and give you a little bit more live control. What is quite nice is the CCs that have been assigned to all of these different mics are the same, depending, or irrelevant, doesn't matter which instrument you have loaded. Mix 1 is also always going to be 22, mix 2 is always 23, etc. So I've got mine programmed here that I can quickly dial up mix 1 There we go, and mix 2 independently from each other, and then mix 1 out. So if I'm just wanting to go from the fairly rough and ready easy mix of 1, and then bring in mix 2 and take away mix 1, I can do that really easily with just a CC controller. And you could program this as a button if you're not worried about levels, particularly in the mix. So that's quite a useful function to have. Over here you've got the pan and width control. So this is the pan down the bottom here, and this is the width for all of the close and spot mics. So for instance here, the close mic of the flute is now turned on. And if I play a note, I can pan it left, sorry, right and left. And I can choose if it's very wide in the mix or very narrow. So essentially you can make your signal mono and then post it around, or make it wider and then move it around. That's quite a useful feature to have. Beyond there you've got the FX, which we saw earlier, and this gives you the variations and the various settings. I wouldn't call them effects. They are not really effects apart from the reverb, which is clearly a convolution reverb. On this option, for instance, we've got a little knob that will control tightness and variation. So I can choose the reverb, turn it up, I can change tightness. So on this section, I've turned all my volume off. There we are. Let's have a microphone back. There we go. So here we've got tightness. A bit looser. A bit too tight. About right. And then you've got control of reverb, so I can turn the reverb all the way down. And have live control over those. They're all programmable, but I guess if you're using a CC controller for this plugin, you may already have some favorite CC sliders you use. I think it'd be a lot of hassle reprogramming this entire plugin with every single controller, so I think I'm just going to use one I've already got and just use the default settings. Conveniently, if you're already a Spitfire audio user, what they've done is they've actually programmed in what they have had as standard for most of their plugins. They they call it kind of unified architecture for their plugins, which is quite useful. So that is the interface. It changes color depending on what instrument you got loaded. Woodwinds, for instance, are blue, and I'm just going to load a brass. Let's load a trumpet. Trumpets, for one reason or another, are red. So there we are, red trumpets, blue woodwind. Maybe not your color choice, but that's the choice they have made. So that's the interface. I'll be doing more walkthroughs of the various sections later.